A very good morning to all of you. And I'm really delighted to be back at the GTS. Uh, you know, to come back year after year to see a summit like this grow is really a very good feeling. And you are right, Rudra, that I did push it in the early years. I'm not sure it was very gentle, but the fact is really, when I look at the reach and the impact, there's sort of a lot of satisfaction in it. I hope you'll keep growing. I think the theme which has been picked is particularly timely because today technology is very much at the heart of geopolitics. You could, of course, argue that it was always so. It was always so because, whether it was nuclear or whether it was space or the internet or artificial intelligence, I mean, it's actually, if you look at the quantum jumps in history, the quantum jumps in history parallel with some time lag quantum jumps in technology. And it's not just in the modern era. I mean, you can go back to metallurgy, you can go back to shipbuilding, you can go back to aviation. That is really the story of both human progress and, in a sense, of competitive national politics. And it has led to a number of policy outcomes. Countries have fashioned their national security decisions. They have made decisions about what kind of influence they will get by applications of technology. And it's not just applying technology, it's also sometimes restricting it, it's steering it. In fact, in a sense, when I was thinking about the subject today, I was reminded of my own PhD, which was about 45 years ago. The subject I started off was really how US decision makers who were poised to peak the Manhattan Project. I mean, they knew they had something very big in their hands. And they are now debating among themselves, what are the geopolitical implications of this? How have we given too much to the Russians or Soviets at that time? How does it change our strategy to bring the Pacific theater to a close? So the reason I sort of highlight that as an opening remark is really that, when we think today of competitive politics, sharper contradictions, I think we should be more and more cognizant that it's going to be driven by technology and also be visible or be reflected in the technology debates. Now, I had 6 basic points to make today. One, and I say this especially to my own friends and colleagues and people in India, we cannot be agnostic about technology. And we have to stop pretending that there's something neutral about technology. Technology is no more neutral than economics or any other activity. And, you may speak about whether it is data or oil or oil as, data as the new oil. The fact is more and more things are technologically driven, and we need to understand that there's a very strong political connotation which is inbuilt really into technology. I mean, orthodox way of looking at it would be to go into the world of export controls and technology controls, which is still very, very relevant. In fact, in the last few weeks and months, it has become even more so. But even, I would say, technology in terms of how you influence politics and how you actually shape decision making in different societies. My second point would be, for technology and geopolitics, the obvious big picture context is globalization. If you look at globalization, in essence, I mean, what is globalization? It is about economy, it is about technology, it is about mobility. So we have to understand today the globalization big picture is very much at the heart of geopolitics. And it's a false argument to present it as, are you for globalization or against globalization? I don't think today anybody can be against it because it's such a deep reality. I think the right argument is, are you for collaborative globalization, or are you for a globalization model which allows domination by a few players? And so how flat, or in a sense, and how broad is your globalization model? I think that, to my mind, is the real debate. And that debate is going to be very much driven by technology. And therefore, to my mind, neither technology nor globalization should be considered really economic issues. I think they're very strategic issues. As a political scientist, I regard them as a political science issue rather than economics issue. My third point, we live in an era where, in many ways, the Westphalian model of international relations is over. For us, in this era of technological interpenetration, to say that, all states are equal, everybody is a black box, and it doesn't matter what happens inside that black box. It does matter what happens inside the black box. I think we people, especially in India in the last 2.5 years, have woken up to the fact, where does our data reside? Who processes, who harvests our data? What do they do with it? I think that's a very, very key question. And when we look at our partners, whether it's technology partners, strategic partners, political partners, I think the quality of partners and the sociology of partners, I think is a very, very important point. All partners are not the same. And therefore, today, trust and transparency have become key issues. We have, in a domain like telecom, already seen in India the concept of a trusted provider. I think in the digital side, we are going to hear more and more the concept of trusted geographies. So the moment you start talking trusted geographies, the geopolitical connotation of that is very, very clear. My fourth point, just as the Westphalian model has started to become less relevant, obviously when it comes to supply chains, the Nagoya model has also started, I think, to become less relevant. Between COVID, conflict, and climate change, just in time is just too risky. So the world, and I think particularly large countries with deep interests, are actually moving to a just-in-case approach rather than a just-in-time approach. And a lot of economic choices and technology choices are going to be driven by a just-in-case approach. So if you actually have resilience and reliability in supply chains, and you have trust and transparency when it comes to data, I would suggest if you add these two concepts up, you're going to, the outcome you're going to get is a very different geopolitical outcome than it used to be before. The fifth point I would make is regarding India itself. Our sense of technology in the past has been very narrow, and I speak here particularly from a governmental perspective. Typically, if you ask people in government, what's your sense of strategic technologies, they would say, well, defense, nuclear, space. I think that's like 50 years out of date. Today, there's a completely different world there, where the building of deep strengths is actually going to determine our capabilities. So to my mind, in a way, what we in India call Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is like a self-reliant India, you can say a kind of an economic strategic autonomy. That is today going to be key for global rebalancing. That big players are going to consciously strive to be technologically more I don't want to be self-sufficient, but technologically more capable in order for rebalancing to actually take place. And finally, geopolitics ultimately does come down to partners and choices, and with whom do you have what relationship of what consequence. And there are different ways you can slice up multipolarity. You can look at multipolarity, who are your key partners politically, who are your key partners in trade, who are your key partners in energy, and the answer will always be very different. So when it comes to technology, because technology is going to be a key criteria today, I would say our key partners, this is an Indian view, this is my view of what should be India's view, which is, I feel, who gives us access, number one, who is our collaborator, and who is our market. To my, to my view, these should be the criteria of, which direction the needle should move. And if you look at India's geopolitical positioning, I would say it should be a kind of a net assessment of politics, of energy, of economics, but increasingly of where our technological interests lie. And our positioning should really give a substantial weight to that technology factor. So let me just conclude by saying that when we speak about the rise of India, the rise of India is deeply linked to the rise of Indian technology. I think Rudra spoke about semiconductors. It could be semiconductors, it could be 5G and onwards, it could be AI, it could be more commercial space launches and satellite fabrication. But in the world that we are in today, I would still say there might be greater disorder under the heavens, but there is more opportunity in that disorder. So once again, thank you all for being here this morning, and it's a great pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you, Minister, for that stimulating set of remarks to kickstart the GTS 2022. As Rudra said earlier, I mean, that really we started this out with your encouragement and support, and the ministry has backed us since then. So we really, 6 years of this enterprise has made the GTS one of the leading forums today in India and increasingly in the world to discuss the technology policy issues. Now, what I thought I'll start by asking you is much has changed in the world since 2016 when we had the first GTS. And the most important change, which you referred to in your opening remarks, was the nature of globalization. So when you say the Nagoya model just in time, or whether it is the weaponization of interdependence, so you articulated this concept, but when you say we are not going to do the old globalization, what is your approach to the new globalization? Is it completely decoupling? Is it about doing everything at home? Or is it somewhat different?
Sort of a few caveats there. I'm not sure globalization changed so much after 2016. I think the debates and awareness about the real nature of globalization changed. There were things which were happening up to 2016, which in our more sanguine world, we were complacent about. And a lot of these were, it's actually very interesting if you look at the trigger events. In a way, Brexit was a trigger event. Trump's election was a trigger event. COVID has been much more than a trigger event. It's regular disruptions of the global economy due to extreme climate. But the key to my mind is actually a sharper realization that big production shares, big market shares, big resource shares are all going to be leveraged, and leveraged right in your face. So the idea that everybody was going to be delicate about it and going to have rules and will work out something which is good for everybody, that's not the direction the world has gone. We have actually seen very tough decisions made by some countries. Tough, not in the difficulty of the decision, tough in terms of the impact it has on the rest of the world. So I would, if you ask me, so therefore, what kind of globalization? To my mind, certainly many more countries, you need, in a way, much more decentralized globalization. You need many more centers of production. And I cite to you a very obvious example today, which is semiconductors. That the concern in the world about the concentration of production when it comes to chips is very, very apparent. So if you are going to move in terms of de-risking the global economy, a large part of it will have to be to de-risk the technology sources and the production sources associated with it. So when Government of India talks about Atmanirbhar Bharat, the idea of a much more self-reliant India, people kind of, obviously in a politically polemical world, people say, well, you're going back to pre-92, etc. No, we're not. Nobody in the right mind would even think of that. I think what people, the thinking process is really, how do I limit my vulnerabilities? How do I have greater production possibilities in India? Some of it has to do with the risks and the worries about external exposure. Some of it is about our own capabilities. A country like India, it should not have the kind of manufacturing we have today. We are grossly under manufacturing. And, when I hear people saying, well, our future is in services, that's simply not true. Our future is also in services, definitely. But you cannot say that we will grow to be a major power and we're going to give manufacturing a pass. And that is why PLI, for example, the strong support which is today being given to different domains of manufacturing is so vital.
One of the features of the last 30 years of globalization was also the world of technology became increasingly integrated, barring the security-related constraints that existed. For example, American venture capital in China, Apple's production in China, the links between Silicon Valley and China, that's what produced the explosive growth. Two things have changed. I think one, the US-China conflict. The other is the recognition, as you mentioned in your speech, that you cannot simply leave everything to a dispersed chain. Therefore, you need to have some capabilities inside.
No, Raj, I think it's more than that. See, when the debate moves in the direction of civil-military fusion, when you say, this belief that there are technologies and activities that are benign and we can compartmentalize it, and there's that tough world which is a national security world, and there's this nice world where market economics, it will be business as usual. I think that belief has collapsed. You look, our actions, for example, regarding apps in 2020, was actually driven by a concern of where is our data going. And as I said, where our data going is no longer a matter of business and economics. It's a matter of national security. So I would say in a interesting way, because everything has become, everything is being weaponized in this world of ours. So I have to change my approach to the extent of where I should be protective about my interests. I have to define my protective zone in a much broader sense. Now, obviously, no country, can really be an island. So, which is where trusted partners and trusted providers and trusted geographies come. So, there would be partners where I would have the confidence that, to a fair degree, not an absolute confidence, that there will be, shall I say, the possibility of misuse of my data would be much less, because there would be safeguards in those societies or those governments or those economies. There would be countries where it would not be there. And those will be partly influencing my choices.
If you go back, I think one of the tensions in the framework that you identified is how much internal, how do you develop your internal capabilities? Because without those capabilities, you can't really navigate the world of technology. But at the same time, the need for partnerships, the need for engaging trusted partners. For example, if you go back to the 60s, India was among the first countries to develop, electronics all across Asia. Homi Bhabha, under the Department of Atomic Energy, started the Electronics Corporation of India. But then we turned to complete self-sufficiency and we lost a lot of the ground. So today, when you're talking about semiconductor manufacturing in India, bringing people, collaborating, so is that a fundamental change from turning inwards to one where we collaborate with the partners so that our capabilities grow and it's also mutually beneficial to our partners?
The last time I was in DC, we had a meeting in which there were people from the semiconductor industry there. And one of them said that their estimate, and it was a conservative estimate, was that there were 40,000 Indian engineers employed by American companies when it came to the field of chips. So the fact is, there is already at an industry level a fairly deep connect. And it's a connect which is in other parts of digital business. It is there in other industries as well. The world of policy, the world of politics, the world of national security cannot be divorced or cannot be in conflict with what is there, in a sense, on the street. So my sense, again, I don't want. You look in this country, because of this model which gave us so much grief by the time we reached 92. The protectionism is a very easy word to throw at somebody and to kind of delegitimize or to put them down. But in the name of not being protectionist, it mustn't be that you throw the baby out with the bathwater. Surely a country like this must have capabilities. Surely there must be, there must be an industrial policy, there must be a national security policy, there must be a national security industrial policy. I think it's important to get the balance right. It is also, it should be fair not to, as I said, use these throwback images to advocate, a deindustrialized India as a disarmed India. And which one of us wants to see unilateral disarmament in this competitive world?
If you go back again to the 60s, when much of the advanced technologies began in India, our first reactor, including the research reactors, one was American, one was Canadian. Our first power reactor was an American General Electric. Our first satellite was built by Ford Aerospace, and Ford doesn't exist, but